Hello, my name is Jason Guzman, and this is my presentation of my research paper about the title in question, The Collaboration with Governments for Surveillance. Is it ethical? Here we'll be discussing the background and significance of this question, of this collaboration. For example, in the world that we live in today, it is controlled by many governments, and governments want to have control of what the people do and don't do. So, in order to do this, they have sought out to establish relationships with private sector companies like Google and Apple and other big tech companies that are able to collaborate on surveillance tactics and devices. The use of these tactics could lead to a decrease in violent threats and the resolving of cases. But also, surveillance tools could also require the use and implementation of citizens' private information, which some don't feel comfortable doing as they feel that it is an infringement on their civil liberties. Are there good enough reasons to allow these collaborations? Why or why not? Well, let's discuss the benefits, the disadvantages, and the global impact that we see with this collaboration with governments on surveillance tactics. First, let's see the types of surveillance technology. Now, in this diagram, we could see many different types of surveillance technology that are present in our day. But one of the most common ones that we are familiar with is video surveillance and audio surveillance. Also, phone monitoring and location monitoring, as is seen as everybody carries a phone everywhere they go. Now, one of these surveillance excuse me, excuse me. One of these sur- excuse me. One of these surveillance tactics that are seen is the biometrics, which is kind of fairly new, which biometrics means the physical traits that we possess. So by governments being able to scan our face or our fingerprints, they are able to track us. Now, let's dig into the benefits of surveillance collaboration with governments. One of them is presented by Amazon Ring cameras. Now, this has been fairly new in our houses as we see everybody has a Ring camera. And the ability that Amazon has had with this device is that they've partnered with over 400 police departments throughout the whole United States that has allowed these governments to have access to these people's or individuals' cameras in order to assist them with any crimes or cases that they might have where this surveillance may be useful to them. What has been the benefit? Well, these surveillance devices have been able to decrease the number of criminal threats in the areas and has been able to establish in these individuals a newfound sense of vigilance as they might have not seen the amount of violence in their communities as before. Another benefit is the Google partnership with the with the CIA, with the CIA and NSA, which is the Central Intelligence Department and the National Security Association, both entities, governmental entities of the United States. What have been the benefit by partnering? Well, these agencies, by Google giving them access to individuals' information, have been able to identify where they live, things like their phone number, family members, and other valuable information. Why is this important? Well, the CIA and NSA handle various different cases that are unsolved because of lacking documentation. By Google being able to present themselves with this information to these departments, they are able to rally up information and establish a good argument when they go to court. Now, let's talk about the disadvantages of surveillance collaborations with governments. Although they have been good tactics, as we saw in the previous slides, there are also disadvantages to the surveillance collaboration. What are one of them? Well, one thing is that there is a lack of privacy, and many people acknowledge that they are forced to consent to their information being shared with governmental departments, even though they did not consent to it. Take, for example, the quote from Andrew Guthier Ferguson. Andrew Guthier Ferguson, who is a law professor, which he stated, if the police demanded every citizen to put a camera at their door and give officers access to it, we all might recoil or go back and think about if they should really have the right to do that. Individuals' concerns, like Mr. Ferguson, for their protection of privacy is stated in the US Constitution that they have these civil liberties, that they shouldn't be infringed upon. And this has made its way all the way to Congress, in which even legislators have started to produce ideas and bills to regulate these technologies. And one of them, although these bills are not passed yet, have been banned in certain cities already. For example, San Francisco, Oakland, California, and Somerville, Massachusetts, are a couple of these cities that have banned the surveillance modules and devices with certain governments and local departments. What are the global impacts of the collaborations with governments on surveillance? Well, take an article by Euractiv, which is a European news outlet. They mentioned that while surveillance devices may be legal, they found that various governments using it for the wrong purposes. For example, violating basic human rights, as they have been targeted to investigate dissenters, journalists, and opposition party politicians that might not align with their views, in order to entrap them into any legal matter that may not be good for them. These big tech companies are mostly considered when discussing surveillance devices with governments because these big tech companies are the ones that can produce these devices and maintain them, which is why they are the ones mostly seen when collaborating with governments on surveillance. For example, another global impact that we've seen with this collaboration is the conservative governments like China. They force their individuals to see their private information. But in this collaboration made by Apple, one of the world's tech giants, it allowed customers to store some of their sensitive data, like personal contacts, photos, and emails, in commercial data centers and servers, which were stored outside of China, which allowed the people and individuals to feel confident that their information was not being retrieved by their government and used against them. In conclusion, throughout this presentation, we have seen and focused on the collaboration with governments on the topic of surveillance and its implementation, as in ring cameras, as in audio, as in biometrics and facial scanning, or our phone data. Surveillance was understood to be an action of somebody observing another person, or something to be able to gather evidence and data through, which we saw in that diagram all the different examples present. The benefits of collaboration for surveillance were determined to be the ability to decrease the number of threats, but also the disadvantages of this collaboration were seen in the loss of trust between private sector companies and its consumers and the breach of their civil liberties. On a global scale, this collaboration was seen to violate several European laws and cause, but also has seen to protect individuals from government control, as seen in the example of Apple and China. As we conclude this presentation, we have acknowledged all the different benefits and disadvantages, examples of surveillance, and the collaboration with governments. Now, one more question is left. You, the listener, would you consider this, the collaboration of surveillance devices with governments, to be ethical or not? Why or why not?